Hello everybody, welcome. What we're going to do today is record a mock-up video of doing a whiteboard session we do with customers to help identify opportunities around DevOps. Mike has agreed to be the customer today in this mock-up. So Mike, let's get started.
All right.
So Mike, now you're going to be switching personas. I remain who I am.
Okay.
But you're going to now become the customer, right? So why don't you take a minute or two and introduce who you are as a customer and what you are trying to achieve, so our people watching this have an idea of what your company is, what your role is, and what your company is achieving to do. Because we probably would have already had that conversation before we get to meet to do this whiteboard. So if you can give a quick pitch about your persona for the purposes of this video.
All right, so I'm Director of Development for a large insurance company based in the United States, and we have like 6 different business units developing applications for property and casualty, auto insurance, basic insurance areas, and another line of business around investments and that sort of thing. So over the years, though, we've grown by acquisition. We've acquired a number of companies, and a few years ago, we embarked on a consolidation of all those systems. One time, we had 7 different administration systems for our policies. I mean, it was an enormous project. Plus, we brought together a portal that we could serve our independent insurance agents that sell our products to their clients so that they could get quotes, they could rapidly turn those around, register them, get payments done, and all those things. Enter mobile technology. All right, for a few months now, we've been pumping out fast mobile applications to try to compete with our competitors, and quite honestly, we're getting 3-star ratings. We're just not hitting the mark, and I'm afraid we're going to lose market share, and we'll never quite get traction with our consumers, who we also want to provide access to those things and to be able to quote products for themselves. The objective is to grow market share as well as revenues through that new mobile channel.
Excellent, thanks, Mike. So now let's start with the whiteboard, right?
Okay.
So we've already had some kind of a conversation before we show up here, but now we are hopefully having a face-to-face meeting. For the people watching this, I've also done this remotely, right, over a web, but it works best when you're in person, right? Because you can be more interactive and you can collaborate better. Because this is a collaborative exercise between the seller, and this could be a salesperson or a technical seller, and the customer, right? So now we're going to switch personas. We're going to get into get in the personality we are supposed to be for the purposes of this.
Okay.
So Mike, so let's talk about this mobile application you're trying to deliver, right? And let's look at that as a project, which we're going to map out here and identify the bottlenecks. Now, you said your 2 business outcomes which you're trying to achieve is more market share. Is that correct?
Right.
And what was the other one?
Revenue growth over time.
So revenue, right? So you want to make more money.
In fact, the corporate objective is to get double-digit revenue growth within 2 years.
Excellent. So you're going to want to let's draw 2 of these up here.
Right.
Double-digit revenue growth, right? So now we are going to examine how we can help you adopt DevOps to address the challenges you're facing in achieving these 2 business outcomes. Because obviously, if we can't help you achieve these business outcomes or progress towards these business outcomes, why would you want to change what you're doing?
Right.
You understand what the pain points are, but we are trying to help you achieve those better. So let's first look at our definition of DevOps, right? So we look at DevOps, it is how do I get a new feature, a new capability, a new enhancement request, or a bug fix out to production, right? So that your customers can start using them. Now, this might be a customer of yours, or if you do not want to release everything to production, which is very typical for large enterprises, right? You're not going to release every new feature to customers, right? This might be a customer surrogate with somebody who is representing the customer. And the goal of that, Mike, is to get feedback back to the development organization, right? So when that feedback comes, you can use that feedback to improve. And what do you improve? You improve the product you are delivering. So that's the new feature you just created, the new enhancement request, or the bug fix you just addressed. If the customers are using it, you can get feedback going, are people even using that new feature? Are they liking that new feature? Did the bug fix address the problem? Or did it expose another bug fix, right? Or something along those lines. The second thing you improve is the environment to which you're delivering, right? Your mobile application is not standalone, right? It's not a game. It's not something which runs only on the application. It's accessing your actuary systems, your payment systems, all your back-end systems, which are system of records. So when you say you're delivering a mobile application, you're actually delivering the whole back-end services also. Are they performing properly? Are users getting the response times which you want them to get? Because if they're not, you need to change something in your environment. And the third thing which we focus on, which is where the focus of today's presentation will be, is how do you improve the process of delivering the software itself? If there are bottlenecks or inefficiencies in that process, how do you eliminate that? And the three kinds of inefficiencies or bottlenecks we typically see are waste, right, where people are wasting time or wasting work, right? Unnecessary overhead, where they're spending too much time doing supporting work, right? Not doing core work, which is writing code, testing the product. Supporting work would be something like updating documentation, right, or writing status reports. And the third is, overproduction, right, where teams do not collaborate well and they have to do a lot of rework or produce features which don't make it to the final product because they were not planned properly. So any questions about that, Mike?
No, it makes sense. I've always wondered how you get faster feedback to the development team so they know if it's doing what they want it to do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So now let's start with that, right? So let's consider your mobile app needs to deliver a new feature. Does that happen often?
Yeah, I mean, we have iterations we go through, but
Okay.
quite honestly, when we roll out a batch of new apps, it's a, traditionally, it used to be a 6 to 9 month cycle, but these mobile teams are trying to do it in, a few weeks instead, which is pretty disruptive for the rest of the team.
6 to 9 months and a few weeks.
Right.
Now, what about your back-end systems which mobile apps are accessing? Are they still in the 6 to 9 month cycle, or are they?
That's where the problem is. When
Right.
they institute a new app, if it requires a change at the back end, they have very rigid change control processes and testing cycles that they have to go through. They have to provision those tests and make sure the transaction works right before we'll ever release the app.
Right. And we see this happen very often where in an organization, different applications are moving at different velocities, right? And that can be because of the process they're following. It can be because of maturity of the team. How do we bring that all together is an example, is something we'll talk about. But this is an example of a bottleneck, right? There is no synchronization of release cycles between these two kinds of applications.
Exactly.
Right. Now, where do these new features come from? Do they come from your marketing team? Do they come from the line of business? Where do they come from?
Each line of business has its own set of business analysts.
Okay.
And quite frankly, they all have their own development teams. We have a centralized IT group that does all the testing and manages the operations, does the configuration, but the development teams actually reside in the business units.
Okay, so let me draw that here, and let's say we have development teams, per line of business, right? So there's one per line of business?
Yes.
Right, but there are some shared resources also, and we'll come to that.
Right.
Right, so a requirement comes in, let me see if I can switch colors here. A requirement comes in from the line of business, it goes to the analyst.
Right.
Right, do you have some kind of a change control board or a project management office which approves these changes before they move forward?
Only for major projects, for
Okay.
multi-thousand-dollar kinds of things, but these little application changes don't go through a PMO group.
So we'll write a PMO here and
Right.
then just maybe draw a dotted line through the PMO and a solid line here.
Which
Okay.
quite honestly is a problem because they have no visibility over what's happening with that.
Okay, so so let's start highlighting the problems, right? So the first problem we identified is the lack of synchronization or the multi-velocity, multi-platform, scenarios.
Right.
And then you identify that the PMO kind of is off to an island, and they have visibility into some changes and not visibility into other changes.
Right.
Right? Okay, we've highlighted two bottlenecks already, right? So
If I could just elaborate.
Absolutely,
And
sure.
that PMO team is trying to work out some way to do a roadmap, right? They've
Okay.
got components that are being built by these development teams, which are, quite honestly, becoming more agile-like. So they're building small components that they want to show. And there could be component reuse involved, but we just have no idea if they can be reused,
Okay.
right?
So reuse is one of your goals, right? So
Right.
let's highlight that, something you would like to have. Okay, excellent. Now, when you go from dev, the next team is obviously is your testing organization and your QA team, right? Do you have a separate build engineering practice, or are build engineers part of the development team?
We do have a separate team.
Okay.
We bought Rational's BuildForge years ago, and we're
Okay.
pretty good at using that to do our builds.
Okay.
But it's still, we do them nightly. We don't do them as frequently as these teams would like us to.
Nightly is not bad at all.
Yeah.
Right, excellent. So how does these transitions happen from dev to build to QA, right? Is that something which happens smoothly? Do you see any issues with that?
We get fine until we get, so when we get to QA, the first thing that happens is they go into a test cycle. Meanwhile, the developers are waiting to see did it work, right? Is the integration okay? If the integration breaks, then the problem gets thrown back to development. And that cycle can take 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, so you have a bottleneck here of a 2 to 3 week test cycle.
Right.
Right. So that is a big problem, right? Because if your developers are building daily, doing a daily
build, that's
build,
just
right?
integration test, right? We're not even into performance testing yet.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, because if your developer does something on Monday, right, and sends his or her code over through build, it gets built,
Right.
it goes to integration testing. If there is issues with that integration, there's architectural problems.
Right.
Right, they don't find out till Thursday because 2 to 3 week. I'm sorry, not 2 to 3 days.
Right.
They don't find out till Thursday of 2 weeks later, right? And during that time, they continue coding. They might have to do a lot of rework, right? And that is, as I said, one of the biggest bottlenecks we see.
It is,
when it comes to Java. So we definitely need to help you, address some of your integration test issues. Right. So let me write that down here: integration testing, right? And let's continue further. So from the QA environment, right, once that's done, obviously this is talking about one team, right? Are there multiple development teams? How does that integration, when that integration testing happens, is one of your issues that other teams' work is not available? But I'm trying to finalize, why is that test cycle 2 to 3 weeks?
Exactly. So there's a couple things. One is because you've got multiple projects coming in from 6 business units, the issue of scheduling the QA test with the given resources, that is testers and resources to test upon, right, the environment, that's a problem, so scheduling. And then the second piece is, just the resources have to be provisioned and set up. I mean, we do have automated scripts for setting up those environments, and we're developing patterns of things of environments that we need to test upon, but it still takes time to get that set up.
So I want to start drawing out some environments here, right? So there is your dev environment. Is the setting up of that automated also? So do you have separate dev environments which your dev team can deploy?
It doesn't change very often. It's pretty stable, consistent dev environment. So I mean, we don't do much testing back here except unit test. Does the code work, and then we move it on.
And then you get it out to your QA environment, which is where you're saying there's some challenges, right?
Yeah.
The environments have to be available, they have to be provisioned, they have to be set up right. Is test data an issue? Do you have sources of test data or fine test data which can be reused?
No, we have pretty good test data resources. We take snapshots of production data, sanitize
That's
it,
good. That's
and
good.
so
Excellent.
on.
So let's move a little bit forward, right? From QA, what's the next environment it goes to? What's the next team which would test something?
So assuming it passes integration test, then it'll go into system test and performance test.
Right, so let's say system test and let's call it perf. Right now, is the environment very similar, that they have their own dedicated environments to which they are deployed and then tested?
Right.
Okay, excellent. So we'll just draw environments here. So there's a system test and then there's a perf environment. Do these happen in parallel or do they happen one after the other?
One after the other.
Okay, and any challenges here?
Time. I mean, it just takes time to get through all this, and that's really, I mean, this plus the changes to the back end, the synchronization you pointed out, is what causes this 6 to 9 month cycle. That's not sustainable. We have to compress that down somehow. I mean, I've heard we can do this in 90 days, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk about that, right? I mean, because obviously, are you guys from a development perspective looking at agile or developing agile practices?
Yeah, we implemented agile last year in teams, and it's growing as a culture.
Okay,
and so on. But
so I think this then becomes your major bottleneck, right? Because if you have agile and you're doing continuous integration or continuous builds, daily builds, as you said you are, then QA not being able to handle it just starts creating a backlog of all these untested builds, which the developers are not getting any feedback on, right? Now let's talk a little bit about production, right? So there is an ops team over here, right? Are there any other pre-production or other environments it goes through before it goes out to production?
There's a release team that pre-positions it in a staging platform.
So let's put a stage, and then there is finally prod, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, most organizations, especially organizations where there's things like, regulations and compliance, PCI requirements and all, have a separation of duty between the development team and the ops team, right? There has to be a formal handoff. Can't be the same people. It has to be, it has to be a formal chain of control of artifacts as they're handed over. How are those handovers for you? How is it automated? Is it
It's very manual. We have change control meetings every Friday,
Okay.
and where you talk about what's getting ready to be released. Do we have all the sign-offs from the different departments? You know, has it been tested on all these test cases and
Okay.
so on? And
So it's very manual and, you know, so do you have like, I remember when I was working as a developer, right, many years ago, we used to have these marathon release, we used to call them release parties, but they were really release pain, right?
Right.
Where we would be sitting with stale coffee and pizza for a couple of nights over the weekend, trying to get things out to production.
Yeah, and there's an argument going on. Is this thing ready to go? Well, it didn't
Okay.
do this well in this performance test, but the boss says the CEO says this particular set of apps is really important to the business and we have to make this date. So we put it out and hope for the best.
Oh, why? Okay. Well, so test and prod, right?
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. That's scary, but it happens, right? Good. So what about your repositories, right? Where does all this? Do you have like a repository of truth, so to speak, where you can go back and say, listen, we need to do a rollback, right? How do I do a rollback? Is there my system, which as it existed before we did the upgrade, because something slipped through or there was a regulatory change, I need to do a rollback. Something happened, right? Mistakes happen. Do you have a way to roll back or go to a system of truth to say, what did I deploy last or what have I deployed now, right? A lot of customers I go to and talk to them, they say, can you give me an inventory of what's running where? And they're like scratching their heads going, let me ask the three teams who run my prod environments, and they can tell me that. Do you have any kind of,
We have a pretty good configuration management database for our
Okay.
production environment that keeps track of what's running where and so on and so on. And we have pretty good process in terms of rollback. When we get ready to put something in either our mainframe or our distributed app server environments, we take a version of that, back it up, and then we put the new one out. If it breaks, then we reverse it.
but it is still manual.
It's still manual, and it does take. We have to bring our system down to do that. We try to do it in the middle of the night.
Downtime is not good.
Exactly.
And you mentioned you had a release team, right? So let's put release team out here. So there's somebody who's managing this.
Right.
Do they use some kind of tools to do it, or is it like a
very-
spreadsheet
they
and
use a
20,
spreadsheet.
and 20 con calls a day, right?
It's the most complicated spreadsheet I've ever seen.
Excellent. Well, not excellent, but too bad.
Right.
But it is an area of concern, right? Do you gather any metrics about how efficient this is or how productive people are? I mean, do you have if somebody wanted a snapshot of where things were and what your variance to plan was, right? How far behind or ahead you are? Do you have any way of measuring
No,
that?
I mean, I just got hired here 9 months ago.
Okay.
No, sorry, 6 months ago. Got lost track of time. And
Seems like 9
one of
months.
the goals that my boss gave me was once you get a fix on what's going on, you get these new apps started, I want you to develop some metrics around how can you improve your process. And so what we're trying to do now is figure out, well, how much time do we spend in each place?
Right. Because unless you have some data, right, which is consumable, you don't have feedback.
Exactly.
A lot of times people think that when we talk about DevOps, we're just talking about feedback from the customer back, which is invaluable, right? Because it is a question of, are you producing the right thing? Are you delivering the right thing? The feedback during the process is about, am I delivering it right? Can I deliver it in a better fashion, in a more efficient manner? So the feedback which comes here is from everything going left, right? So Ops is giving a feedback to all the organizations before it. Perf is giving a feedback. QA is giving a feedback to developers. All of this feedback is going back to the lines of business.
Yeah.
And so that feedback is used to deliver to improve the process of delivering, to make sure what you're delivering is being delivered right. The feedback from the customer tells you whether you delivered the right thing.
Yeah, so a while ago you talked about this feedback loop from
Yes.
the customer. How do I get the feedback from the customer as to whether this app is doing the right stuff to the line of business?
Excellent. And we don't want to go into solution today,
Right.
but what you're teling me is you don't have a mechanism.
I don't, and
You don't, okay.
that worries me.
So let me highlight that also, right? Because yes, we have a solution, but we have limited time today, so I'm not trying to solve the problem here.
Right.
I'm trying to understand what your different solutions are, challenges are, so we can then prioritize them and figure out which is the right solution for you. But especially for mobile apps, we have some sentiment analysis tools which can tell you how the customer is using it and whether they're liking it or not. We also have tools to start creating and capturing rather metrics of the development pipeline to figure out where your inefficiencies are and are you improving, right? So all those are there. We got to figure out which one is the right one for you, right? So is there any other thing? And I love to make ask this question when I'm having this conversation: is there anything else which is a pain point that we have missed today? Which I didn't ask you about, right? Because I don't know what I don't know.
Right. I mean, to me, it's three things. It's speed. How do I compress the cycle time? It's quality, because these new apps we're betting our business on this stuff.
Okay.
Right. We're betting our business on our mobile strategy, and so quality is the issue number one. I would rather be late than not have the best app out there, right? And then the third thing, I think, in a priority order, then, is the ability to get a visibility over my roadmap of agile apps that are being built, so that we can fit all that stuff together from a program management perspective.
Excellent. So that's great, because we identified maybe half a dozen areas of pain here, so to speak, or bottlenecks in a delivery pipeline. What you did, what I would have done next which is prioritize them, right? So now we can take these three areas: quality, speeding up your process, right, and then creating an enterprise-wide view, or at least a project-wide view of where things are,
right,
and then you can go to a project or projects, right, a view above that, to understand where you are and how you're doing, because that is what will tell you how to improve,
right,
and that will also give visibility to your PMO to start working on a roadmap, because they will get a global view. So what we need to do, Mike, is I really appreciate your taking the time to explain this, and help us understand where your challenges are. What we would like to do is go back and digest this information, right? So me and my colleagues from IBM will do that, and then we'll set up another meeting where we will come back and propose solutions to you, a roadmap to help you address these three bottlenecks which you have prioritized, to say, this is where my pain points are, this is what I want to address, right? We take a very lean-centric approach of view. What does lean say? We look at your artifacts, how they're flowing through, look at where time is being spent, and then work on identifying areas of improvement. Now, we haven't done an analysis and assessment of where people are spending time, right? We do a whole 3-day workshop to figure that out, right? We are not doing that today, but this has narrowed it down to tell us what are the 3 areas most important to you. So we'll come back with a roadmap, a high-level roadmap, to help you start addressing these 3 bottlenecks, right? And then it'll improve changes to the way people are organized, potentially changes to your processes, definitely. And we like to understand what tooling you use today to see whether that tooling can suffice to provide you the capabilities you need, or maybe you need to introduce some new tooling and substitute some out with some from IBM, right? Obviously, we are in this software business, so we would like to understand better. So thank you for your time, and I think this was hopefully this was useful to you also to understand. Yeah. And this is just one project, right? I would love to have the opportunity to come and meet with your peers or with other projects which are in your domain, and do this for other projects also, because that will give us the patterns across your organization. Right. This is a snapshot, right? So we actually have a lean assessment which takes around 10 minutes. I'm going to send you a URL. I would like you to take it, Mike, but more importantly, I would like you to send it to your team. Maybe not to every practitioner, but the people who own these different, every stick figure here, somebody who represents those. Your team leads them.
Test manager, release manager.
Dev manager, test manager, release manager.
PMO
your
office.
Build engineer, your release team, PMO.
Okay. All right.
Some of your stakeholders. We just want to get some more data points and start correlating, right? Do they all think that these are the problems, right? And where do they perceive the bottlenecks are? Because then we can do some root cause analysis to identify how to address these challenges for you, right? So that's going to be the next step.
Excellent.
We'll come back we'll let our sales account manager here, set up a meeting with you, maybe next week or two, where we can present the roadmap to you. Okay. In the meanwhile, if you could have your team take that assessment, right? As I said, it takes only 10 minutes. We can start getting some more data points to help us refine this picture. Excellent. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, folks, so this was a quick mock-up of something we do with customers all the time. As you can see, this is something very valuable, not just to us, but every customer I've done it with finds it useful to them also, because they've never really done an exercise like this. The next step would be for us to take these 3 bottlenecks we identified here, and I typically try to narrow it down to 2 to 3 with the customer, and come back to the customer with some guidelines, some guidance on what we want to help them with, right? So here for QA, we might propose to them shift left test, right? Integration testing, test virtualization to help them do their testing better. right? For the reducing their delivery cycle, they already do agile. We might talk about using something like urban code deploy with patterns to speed up their process of deploying and provisioning a QA environment. We'll need to obviously look at their QA practices to figure out why it takes so long, right? It's not just a tooling issue, it's a practice issue.
Mm-hmm.
And for the PMO, we need to start having a discussion with the PMO to figure out what tools they use today, what kind of visibility do they have. And so that is a discussion which will take much more time, right? But if we introduce some things like rational team concept here with some of the dashboarding which is there, it can really improve that visibility. Now, again, I came up with these off the top of my head. Typically, I would sit down with the sales team, brainstorm about this, and maybe come back to the customer, ask them some more questions which we might not have asked today to come up with a good proposal. But this is just a beginning of a conversation. This is something you have when you don't know much about the customer. You wouldn't need to do this with a customer you've been engaged with for years, where you understand these bottlenecks already. So hopefully this was useful, and this is something we can do with many more customers. Thank you.